Great, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining our DIY series event today about updating digital marketing in uncertain times. This is part of our Creative Industry Network. For those that I don't know, I am Monica Takis, Senior Director for Industry Networks at the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I'm very pleased that you've joined us today. Before we start the presentation, I just want to let you know that if you do have questions, please put them in the chat function or the chat bar. There's a control panel at the bottom, and you can just chat your question there. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Justin Seibert. Justin is the president of Direct Online Marketing. Since 2006, Direct Online Marketing has helped businesses around the globe increase leads and sales through pay-per-click advertising, search engine optimization, and other forms of digital marketing and advertising. In addition to being a premier Google partner, Direct Online Marketing is ranked in the top 2% by Google of all of their partner agencies, and this is based on its ability to drive client success. Justin has been named a top 25 most influential expert in search for speaking at conferences throughout the world. Justin has also been featured in publications like Advertising Age, Search Engine Strategies Magazine, and La Voz del Interior. He received a BA from Vanderbilt University and graduated from the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program at Babson College. And without further delay, I welcome Justin to share his experiences with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Monica. Bienvenidos. Buenas tardes. ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Dos cervezas, por favor. Lo siento. I gave a very similar presentation like this yesterday to the American Chamber of Commerce in La Paz, Bolivia, and that's what I started with. And then I had to tell them that unfortunately I had exhausted then at that point 30% of all my Spanish knowledge and had to give the rest of it in English. So let's get to it today. I'll be giving it all in English and hope that's okay here. I'm going to skip over some of these slides. Thanks, Monica, for the information that you shared. But there is more information on here. And I would just say that anybody that would love to connect or that wants to connect on LinkedIn, especially, or Twitter, I would love to stay connected with you. More information about this, if we're able to make the slides available to you, I'd be happy to do so. I include these in the beginning. These are the why my mother likes us and why you should like us 2 slides, but I include them just because sometimes people wonder, who are you? What have you done for people? Do you have any kind of credibility? So we show some examples of the companies that we've worked with from all over the world, as well as some of the results that we've had for them. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the presentation today. As Monica mentioned, please ask questions at any time. And she is going to interrupt me if it's a question like, hey, Justin, I didn't understand what that was. Can you go over that again? Or can you share that resource again? If it's something that's more like, hey, how is this applicable to my business? Or I have this very specific question. Normally, I would take those during the presentation when it's a live event in person. But when it's a webinar, I've found that it goes a little bit better at the end of the presentation. But you can put it in the chat bar, like she mentioned, just so you don't have to try to remember it later on. And we'll make sure that we get to it. We packed in, I've taken about 2 hours worth of material and I've skinnied it down into about 35 minutes of material. If there is anything that you want to go deeper into, I'm happy to do that, but understand that we're going to start high level so that we hopefully don't lose anybody. We're going to talk about kind of a framework for understanding this time that we're in and how you might want to adjust your marketing strategies. Then we're going to go through strategy and then finally into tactics, so that hopefully we provide a really great base for everybody. And again, answer any questions specifically to you that we can. So jumping in, I think it's helpful to think of your business over these past couple months and into the future as being in one of 5 stages. So the first stage, you're in survival mode. Everything is just about making it through to the next day. The second is it's a downturn. You've obviously been adversely impacted by what's going on. But how can you, but you're not quite at that I'm barely hanging on stage, but certainly cash is a concern. You might be flat. Maybe it's a little more volatile than normal, but your business is running about the same as it was before. You may have a little bit of an uptick, Or you may have huge amounts of opportunity for you. Think like if you're in the medical industry or cleaning industry or something like that. So we're going to go through this after we get through setting the strategy and the tactics. We'll come back to this framework and we'll give you suggestions based on which of these areas that you think that you're in. So jumping in, it's always important to start with defining your goals. And the big thing that I want to get across, a lot of times when I talk with people, if they're interested in digital marketing and I ask what their goals are, sometimes they'll say something like, hey, I really want to get a lot more Facebook likes. And I don't know about your banking relationship, but when I go to my bank, I can't actually cash those Facebook likes. So it's important to really start with understanding what your goals in the real world are, and then you can back those down. And so you want to define your key performance indicators. And in many cases, this might be a sale online or a sale offline. It may be something like a lead that you're generating of various qualities, and a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead, but something where you have a really tangible thing that you're working with. Then from there, you back out and understand what your intermediary metrics are. That can be a certain amount of traffic. It might be a visit to your locations page where somebody can look up directions. It could be a Facebook like, something along those lines. And then the most important thing is to make sure that you measure everything. The reason I fell in love with digital marketing in 2001 when I started doing it is because I didn't have to guess at what worked. I could see whether something was working or not. And there's plenty of times things don't work. But when you see that, you're able to make adjustments and either decide it's not something that's going to be able to work for you, or what can you tweak to get better results. And in setting your strategy, you start with those goals that you've set out in the beginning, and then understand who your audience is and what are they looking for? What are the characteristics? All these questions that we have on this particular slide, I think this is information that you probably already know, but I'm going to encourage you to write it down. It helps provide clarity when you're putting out a marketing plan. And if you are working with someone else in your company, or you're working with an outside partner, it's really critical that you transfer this knowledge to them so that you can devise the best strategy. Certainly understanding the geography. If you're selling locally within Pittsburgh, that's very different than if you're selling internationally. And there's all sorts of iterations in between those. Really understanding what the competition is like. What are you up against? And then the tactics that we're going to spend a decent amount of time in here a little bit that are right for those, especially with the audience and with the competition that you're facing. And then the big thing I'm going to push is how are you going to test? How are you going to measure? How are you going to test those results? Because you should always have a plan. This is not a set it and forget it kind of deal. I'll give an example of Google Ads very quickly. There was someone that had come to us. He was a military defense lawyer, and he was advertising on the word DOHA. And it made sense for him because that was an acronym, Department of Office of Hearing and Appeals, I believe. So if somebody was looking for information about that department, it would make sense that they might be able to use his services. But for those of you that understand your geography a little bit, you might also know that DOHA can mean multiple things, one of which is the capital of Qatar in the Middle East. And so when we reviewed his advertising account, we found that he had spent $10,000 on straight up Arabic searches. And when I was running those through Google Translate, which is not the best translator tool in the world, but it gives you an idea of what people are talking about, it was literally phrases like best falafel shop in Doha. So none of these things are set and forget it. These are all things that you need to test and constantly monitor to see whether it's going to work for you or not. Now, this is your monopoly stop, do not pass go moment. If you do not have this and you don't hear anything else I have to say today, please hear this. You want to make sure that you set up a Google, an analytics account. I recommend Google Analytics. It's free. It's the most popular analytics tool in the world. And it shows you how people are going to interact with your website. And it tells you how are, not only how are people interacting, but are they taking the actions that you want them to take? What pages do they find most popular? How are they entering your site? How much time do they spend there? And the bottom line, not to beat a dead horse or sound like a broken record, but I can't guarantee you that any of the things that we talk about today will work for you, but I can guarantee you're going to know whether they work for you or not. I just have a few screenshots. If you have not used Google Analytics, we'll get through this very quickly if you have. But to give you an idea of the type of information that you get, they can tell you about the people that are using your site, how many separate unique users there are, how much time did they spend there, how many pages. And then some of the stuff that I think is most interesting is you can see wherever in the world those people are coming from. They'll give you a table of data as well, but the darker the color, the more people that are visiting from that particular location. And you can drill down beyond the country level, and you can start getting in and seeing regions, and you can even see the cities within the country as well. So tons and tons of information that you can get from analytics. But the single most important thing that you can track are conversions. And I'm going to use the word conversion and goal interchangeably here. But at the high level, a conversion or goal is simply, what is it that you want people to do when they come to their website? So I'm going to pause for a second, and I would like everybody, if you can do me a favor, just throw things into the chat bar for a second and say, what are some of those actions that you would like people to take when they hit your website? Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good stuff here. I'm going to read out some of these responses as we go. Buy tickets, register for an event, submit an inquiry form or application, request a proposal, call us for more information, go to our admissions office and schedule a visit, trial sign up. These are excellent. You all definitely understand what we're talking about here. Thank you for that. And for the other ones that I didn't get through to read, but it's whatever that action is. It can be leaving a review, it can be purchasing something, it can be filling out a form to be contacted, signing up for a newsletter, leaving a rating, whatever those actions are. And the most important thing on a website, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how can you drive traffic to a website, but this concept of conversion rate optimization, that just means how do you get more of the people that come to your website to take the action that you want them to take. It's the single least used and most important tactic that you can do, but people don't talk about it. We talk about how do we drive more traffic. We don't talk enough about how do we get more out of the traffic that's already coming to your website, because you don't have to spend another dime to get better returns if you're getting more of those people to take the actions that you want. And so there's a giant formula or a big formula that you can use. I've seen that it's really into the details of how do you increase those conversions or those goals, but it's helpful to think of them in two key areas. And the first is incentive. How is it that you make people want to do the thing that you want them to take? So for example, if you told me, and I believed you, that you were going to send me a Brinks truck full of gold bars, whatever information you wanted online, I'd give you my kids' social security numbers. I'd probably send you my kids in the mail, right? But most of us aren't offering something that's that inherently interesting to people. So we have to work on the other factor. And that's how do we decrease friction? And friction is simply, what is it that causes a person not to want to do what you want them to do? If you're in an e-commerce situation, simple rule of thumb is follow what Amazon does. How do you make that process as simple as possible, just to push a button, get people to make that purchase? But I'm going to give one example that I think is the most misused in e-commerce, and I'm going to give one example that for lead generation, and that would include schools, I would include that for nonprofits as well, that I think are the two biggest sources of friction. So on the e-commerce side, my big pet peeve is when you require somebody to have to sign up for an account to make a purchase. I know I'm not alone in this, and I know some people will do that. And certainly if I want something bad enough that you're selling, I will do that. But there's so many times that you see that, and then you just bounce and go to another website where you're not required to do that. On the lead generation, on the form side of things, we often will ask for a lot of information from people. We want to know not just your name and your phone number and your email. We want to know what your physical address is. Maybe if you're in a school situation, we want to know what year are you graduating, what field are you interested in, and that's all good information. But we're really asking that to make our lives easier, and our job is to make our web visitors' life easier. How do we make it easier for them to give information so that we can then contact them and move them down the funnel that we're trying to do. So I'm going to ask everybody, please take a look at your websites, look at the form pages on your websites, and think about what fields can you remove from that. Now, there's only one field that you can actually add that will increase conversion rates. And that field is a questions or a comments box. So I'd encourage there are some forms that doesn't make sense on, but for most forms, I would encourage people to have a questions or comments box, and you can name it however you want. But the reason to do that, I think psychologically, I've never seen a study that says why, but I think what happens is people believe that they're going to get an answer to their specific question and not just be thrown on some like newsletter list that they're going to get spammed on later. So I would encourage everybody to look at that type of form or that field to put on their forms. And I'll take a pause here for a second to drink, but also to share that if there's anything that we've gone over in a slide, again, any questions, I wasn't clear about something, please ask. Monica will interrupt me. If it's something that's more of a longer conversation, we'll take that at the end. Now, the last thing we'll talk about before we get into tactics are reviews. And so reviews can be on any site like Google Maps. It might be called Google, it's called Google My Business now, sometimes referred to as Google Local Listings. That can be on TripAdvisor, that can be on Yelp, all those individual local sites. And you want to ask people actively for reviews, to review you, because people are most likely to leave a review when they're not happy with you. That's when you don't need to ask them. So you want to encourage the people that you know are happy, reach out to them selectively and ask them to leave a review. Make sure that you're monitoring all your reviews. And the easiest way to do that is to make sure that you've claimed your listings. We'll talk about that for Google on the next slide, but that you've claimed your listings at review sites, because in most cases, they will email you automatically anytime a new review comes in. And make sure that you actively, and I say calmly, respond to all reviews. It's easy to respond calmly when somebody pays you a compliment, but when they're upset, and they might be completely irrational, you might disagree with what they're saying wholeheartedly, but understand you may not be able to flip them, but that comment that you're making on their review is seen publicly by other people. So they're looking to see how you're responding to them, and that can really hurt you if you're not careful. And there's a lot of cases of businesses that have actually gone out of business by doing this the wrong way. I want to give a story about how powerful these can be. It's just one example. I had a buddy that a couple years ago moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and he needed to buy a washing machine. So he asked around at work at his new job, and they said, "Oh, go down to Joe's. That's the place to get appliances." And so he was getting late after work. He was putting in a lot of hours, and he was walking out the door to head down to Joe's. And he said, "You know what? I better just check to make sure they're still open." So he pulls them up on Google to check the hours, and then he sees an average rating of 1.2 stars. So he started reading the reviews, and he was seeing things like, their stuff broke, they never returned my calls, these guys are a bunch of scam artists, they track dirt everywhere. So he took his keys out of the door, and he sat back down in his chair, and he started looking to see where he was going to buy his washing machine. And the scariest part about this to me is that Joe's doesn't even know they lost that business. That was money in their hands, but they don't know that they lost that business because they weren't checking the reputation online. They weren't making sure that they had a good online presence, because that's what people are doing. They're checking you out for credibility. And this is an example of Google My Business, of the Google local listings. And as you can see here for the Pittsburgh Tech Council, of course they have a 5.0 star rating because they're awesome. You can see where that shows up there. But I want you also, when you're looking at your business, and please do this. If you don't know that you already have this claimed, everybody should be doing this right now in a separate window, or do it as soon as the webinar is over. And do a search for your business. You might have to put Pittsburgh next to it to get the location. And then if you see where that arrow is pointing, it's a little tough to see, but you can see a question that might show up that says own this business. And then you would click on that. And if your business hasn't been owned or hasn't been claimed already, you can go through the process of claiming it. Again, it's free. If it has been claimed, it'll tell you that somebody else owns it already. But you just want to check that to make sure that that you have claimed it, so that you can respond to reviews. You can be notified when they come in. You can choose the pictures that you're putting up. And good job by the Tech Council. Of course, they've claimed theirs, so don't try to scam them and get control of their listing. All right, now let's jump into digital marketing tactics. I looked at the list of attendees that had registered and tried to look up most of your businesses. It appeared to me that the majority of you are focused on the US, so I'm going to talk about the US. If you are focused internationally, happy to take those questions at the end. But just understand that in all but 4 countries around the world, Google is the most popular search engine. And you, even in those other countries, you can still get some presence there if you're taking advantage of Google. You can get into Russia without being on Yandex. You can get into Korea without being on Naver. You can get into Japan without Yahoo Japan. But in China, there's a giant firewall Google pulled out of there a few years ago, and you'll get virtually no coverage in China whatsoever. You can get a little bit in Hong Kong, but not in China mainland itself. So you would need to be in Baidu and some of their other search engines like 360 and Shenhua as well. Now, why search engines? It's all about intent. You're actively reaching people that are looking for what you're selling, and you're reaching them at the moment they're most interested in it. So TV, radio, billboard, all these are amazing ways to reach people that can be right for you. But it's a fundamentally different process, a fundamentally different benefit than with search engines, where you're reaching people that are looking for what you're selling. And there's 2 ways to do this. I pulled up one from Chilean results, but it doesn't matter. Anywhere in the world, it looks pretty much the same on Google. So there's top listings that you're looking at that are in orange. Those are all pay-per-click ads. We'll talk about those in a second. And those listings that are underneath are search engine optimization. How do you make your site, in essence, Google friendly to show up there? You might hear phrases like natural listings or organic listings. I'm going to do my best to say jargon-free as much as possible, but all those things kind of mean the same thing. That's where Google thinks you are the best result, or one of the best results for what the person is searching for. Now, what are the benefits of SEO? You can really get huge amounts of that targeted traffic that we just talked about. You don't have to pay for it. I put that in quotations because you're going to pay for it in effort. You're going to pay for it in time. If you're working with somebody on the outside or somebody inside that you're paying as part of their job, there are those costs associated, but you're not going to pay Google to be there. This third one is one that I didn't get originally, and it might be the single biggest benefit of having a strong natural presence in Google, and that's legitimacy. If a company is looking you up, or a consumer is looking you up, first, if you're not showing on your name, that's really bad news. You need to make sure that you're showing up when they're doing that search. But even more so for the things that you sell, the products or services you sell, when you're showing up, they're automatically start thinking, well, this is a legitimate company that I'm looking for. And it really adds up in their eyes, and in addition to the exposure that you get. And when you're not showing up, it's adding to the legitimacy of your competitors. It is long-term. Google will make big changes to their formula, algorithm, they like to call it, that can sometimes have big impacts on your rankings. But for the most part, as long as you're doing the things that Google likes, then it's going to last longer term for you. And you do get data to see whether it's working or how well it's working. For me, what matters most is my family. And I swear that's true, even though I just said I would ship you my kids for a truck full of gold. I figure I could always buy some other ones. But with Google, what matters most to them is the user experience. Because Google's built the world's greatest information system, information company in the history of the world. And it's all predicated on giving you information that you're looking for when you do a search. So as soon as you stop seeing information that you find valuable, their whole financial house of cards comes tumbling down. So it's really critical that they create a great user experience for Google by sharing information on sites that will give the searcher a good user experience. Now, we think about that formula. The most important thing to understand is that everything is keyword based. So I'll talk with companies sometimes when they say they want to be on the top of Google. Well, that's great. What keywords would you like to be on the top of Google for? And a keyword meaning it could be one word or multiple words, but whatever the person types into the search engine. And they say, well, all of them. Well, that's not really possible. You have to optimize pages of your site for particular keywords because Google is looking at each keyword as being a separate auction, if you will, that it's going to show different results for. And so they manage this through that big algorithm we talked about, that big formula. And that formula has hundreds of variables, and they change those variables more than once per day. We know those variables fall into one of two categories. And the first category, I like to think of as authority. That's stuff that primarily you have control over that happens on your website. Are you talking? Do you have good content about what the person is searching for? Is it optimized for those keywords? Do you have a lot of errors on your websites? Does it load quickly? Is it a good experience on mobile? But Google can't just rely on that because you control that. It'd be really easy to game the system. So Google also looks at credibility factors. And those are primarily things that happen off of your website that you might be able to influence, but that you don't have control over. So that's links that are built back to your website. That's it mentions in the newspaper, mentions in a press release. It can even be social media. All of that can influence SEO and the credibility in Google's eyes. And I cut out a bunch of slides here. This is usually where I get the most questions. So if you do have questions about how the algorithm works or how do you optimize your site, happy to take those at the end as well. Moving into PPC though, so we can get through as much information as possible for you. Understand that it's also keyword based like SEO. If you couldn't guess by the name, the model is pay per click. You'll pay actually only when somebody clicks on your ads. And I like to think of that as meaning it has a doubly targeted ad because the person first has to type something related to what you sell and then look at all the information on the screen and decide that your information is the most relevant to them and click on your ad. And that's the first and only time that you're going to pay for that ad or for that click. And you get to choose targeting factors, day of week, time of day, and then you're measuring those results in real time. It's incredibly fast. You could have ads up this afternoon if you wanted. You can target people like we talked about, even how they've interacted with your site previously. You're going to see what works. And of all the things we talk about, this is the area where you can test the most. So the more you can design tests to try out little things, even as small as how does this ad copy work versus this ad copy? Because you can run two ads against each other to see which one's more popular. That's information that you can get from pay-per-click ads. On social media, I'm going to talk, I think people generally have a better sense inherently of how social media works. I'm going to concentrate just on a couple areas, and I'm going to concentrate specifically on advertising. But again, when we get to the question section, I'm happy to answer questions on other platforms as well. But we're going to start with Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. In all cases with social media, you start by choosing the platform where your demographics are. So if you're trying to reach 18-year-old kids, LinkedIn's not going to be the best place for you, right? If you are trying to reach 18-year-old kids, 10 years ago, Facebook would have been a great place for you, or 5 years ago would have been a great place. Now that's going to be a pretty tough place as well. And you want to be on other sites, maybe like Instagram. Also, like we talked about at the very beginning of this, make sure that you're matching your ad goals to your real world goals. You'll pay per engagement, meaning you'll pay when somebody likes or clicks or shares or does something with your ad, with your company. And then you can also tie in offline data. And I'll give a couple specific examples of that as well. Now, the benefits of it is, I know you people, you're really dedicated. You are not on social media during the day at all. You might do a little bit at night because you're hard at work. But understand that not everybody is like that, and they are spending massive amounts of time on social platforms. This is a great place to reach them. You know, you look at some of the video options that are available today, especially, those are great ways to reach people where they're spending more time than they ever have before. You can also boost your follower counts in these areas. And then understand that in the beginning, when you had somebody follow you on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, it was easier for them to see that information. All those platforms have now sculpted it so it's harder for them, just because they're following you, to see your information. And so ads are a way that you can actually get more of those people to see the messages that you have. With Facebook and Instagram, understand that Facebook, on average, for every US user, has over 1,500 different pieces of data, because they have data based on what you've told Facebook directly, based on what you've liked, based on how you've gone around the web, because most of us don't log out of Facebook to do that. And they even have data based on third-party data aggregators that they're bringing in, like household income, what kind of car you drive, that kind of information. Facebook has kind of pulled back after the last set of election snafu type stuff, where they're not allowing you to advertise on as many of those variables, but there's still more than 1,000 different variables that you can use. And the same platform controls advertising on Facebook or on Instagram or on both of them. So we'll show you some of these things. On every type of digital advertising we're talking about, you control location, and you can do that down to the zip code level. You can do demographics, what are people's behaviors, what do they like. So that's a great way to reach consumers. If you're in the B2B space, it depends on, again, your demographics you're trying to reach, but LinkedIn can be really successful. And the big trick with LinkedIn is, where we've had the most success in running campaigns, is when there's a really quality content offer that people are interested in. So a white paper, a webinar, something along those lines. And I would encourage you to test different ones to see what people respond to. And there's 3 primary ways that you can target. You can target by company information, like the specific company or the industry or the size. You can look at the person's job title, the seniority level, what kind of functions that they're in, or even what groups they're associated with on LinkedIn. Display advertising. In the old days, you would reach people by buying an ad directly on a website, banner ads. Now you can do that through third parties, so that you don't have to go directly to the website. A lot of times you can backdoor them, because they're usually selling excess inventory. Not in all cases, but many cases, they're selling it to a third party, like a Google Display Network. Tons of ways that you can reach those people. You can choose a specific site. You can choose based on what that site is talking about, what the person's behavior has been. And then you can upload a customer list, and they'll match that to people and show that way demographics. One of my favorite ones is in market. There's a list of different things that people have been searching for, such as they've recently been home shopping, looking for a vacation. You can reach people that are looking for those types of things. So there's all sorts of super creepy stuff that is actually pretty cool from a marketer's perspective. And my favorite of the creepy stuff is retargeting. You might hear the word remarketing. It means the exact same thing. It's cyber stalking. It's when you leave a website and you start seeing ads for that website. Maybe you're seeing that same shirt you were looking at, or a pair of pants that would go great with that shirt. Retargeting I love because it's very low cost and it works really well in most cases. So it's a very high return on investment when it's done properly. There's only 2 times we see when it's executed properly where the success isn't there. The first is where if you only have a very small amount of traffic to your website already, it's tough to build up enough cookies to be able to do this. And the second is if you're in a sensitive industry like healthcare, there's a lot of platforms that won't allow you to do this type of advertising. And then the last tactic that we're talking about is video. I'm a huge fan of video, not just from an advertising perspective, but from a marketing perspective. But understand it's really easy. It's really inexpensive to do if you have that. I'm also of the belief, especially now, post-COVID, that people are pretty forgiving of what the professional quality of these videos look like. As long as the lighting is good, as long as the sound is good, they can understand you. And you can serve up these ads to reach people and to tell a story in a much richer way than you can do with just words and just pictures. And if you want, I'm happy to get into some tips on the advertising side as well, where there's some ways that you can get ads very, very cheaply, and in some cases even free. Now, last part of this before we go over to the questions. We talked in the beginning about the crisis response framework. So there is this, I don't expect you to remember that URL at the bottom. We should have created a shorter one, shame on me. But this is an infographic that will show you all of these different ways. It's kind of an easy thing that you can print out, that you can look at, you can save to recognize as you move through these different stages, because a lot of times you won't just be in one. How are the ways that you want to adjust your tactics? So we'll start with survival. That's that liquidity crisis situation. You probably want to pause all your advertising. And the biggest thing to me is understanding that anything you're doing from a marketing or advertising perspective is, how do you identify what will produce revenue in enough time? There might be things that will pay off for you eventually, but will they do it soon enough that you get that revenue in the door that it's going to be able to help you out? Look at social media, look at PR, email, video. I'm a big fan of apps here especially. So if you already have an app, that's a great way to increase communication and do push messaging out to the people that have downloaded your app. If you find yourself in that, I'm not concerned that my business is going to close tomorrow, but we're certainly losing revenue, you want to get as lean as possible. Pause all of your campaigns that you're doing except those that you can measure, that you can see have the best ROI for you. And this is the situation where the single biggest thing that I would recommend for you is building your SEO. So what can you do to create content right now? Because search engine optimization doesn't happen immediately. Google will start to like your site over time based on that content that you build up. So if you have extra time right now, I would put almost all of my effort into creating content that I can use on social, I can use on my website, that I can put out via email, I can put out on my app, but it's going to build for you so that as you start to come out of this declining revenue stage, you can come out stronger than ever. This is also a time that if you are an e-commerce site, doing e-commerce advertising can be great. You're reaching people that are looking directly for the products that you're selling. If you're more of a flat situation, this is the time to look at what challenges you have as well as what opportunities are out there. I would advertise and promote those new offerings that you have. And I'd also say be open to acquisitions, because there are other companies in your industry that might not be faring as well as you are. So are there ways that you might be able to take them on, to take on this customer list, maybe to take on the employees that they have, maybe to take on the whole companies? And all of these tactics we talked about, PPC, SEO, social media, all of these things can work. If you are seeing an increase in revenue, this is definitely a time to try new things out. And I'm probably focusing more on attracting more market share. So if I have a really tight cost per acquisition saying that I need to be at $12 per sale or $12 per lead, maybe now you can go to 15 or go to 20 to get more of those people in the door. And then finally, if you are in that explosive growth situation, what can you do to get as much out there as possible? Because you're in a limited window. So you want to move as quickly as possible to start, and you want to move as quickly as possible to stop as soon as you see that things are slowing down for you. Two things that I really concentrate on: any kind of charitable activity that you're doing, make sure that you're promoting that. People want to see that you're doing good things. And also publicize job openings. Make sure that people know that you're hiring out there. This is a tip for everybody, regardless of what stage you're in. Please, and again, do this right now or do this right after the webinar. Do a search for your company name. Chances are on the first page, one of the listings is Glassdoor. And that's where, if you're not familiar with it, employees can leave reviews directly about your company. And so you need to know what that looks like. And if you haven't done this before, you should start a campaign talking with your employees about leaving reviews for there. And they use their own words, they can rate however they want, but it's a way that people can see. I will tell you that when we've been recruiting, it's very rare that I have a conversation with someone where they don't say that they checked out not just our social media, not just our website, but that they checked us out on Glassdoor to see what were other people saying about working here. And that is it. The last thing that I'll mention, and I'll turn it over to Monica, you can help me with any questions here, and I'll take a look as well. We are offering free consultations. There's no strings attached on anything like this, but if you go to directom.com/Pittsburgh, you can enter your information there. The process is pretty simple. We have somebody reach out to you to schedule a brief call, about 15 minutes, just to learn more information about your question, as well as your goals, competition, some of those types of things. We then take that information back. We do a little bit of research if we need to, and we set up a follow-up call with you. I'll be on that call personally, and we'll go over any questions you have, and again, just give you free advice on anything that we can share with you that we have an expertise in. So I would love to take your questions right now here publicly, but if you're not comfortable with that, this can be a good place to do it.
Thanks so much, Justin. We have 3 questions on the chat right now. So this is actually the first one is in reference to forms that you talked about earlier in the presentation. Do you have any verbiage that you can include so that people don't have to worry that you're going to take that information and just add them to a mailing list and spam them?
Yeah.
And this is something beyond just saying the very generic, we promise not to spam you.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things. I think this comes down to your brand and your voice and how do you want to say it. Like when the first ones came out, like start saying, we promise not to spam you. That was great because people weren't, that was refreshing. Then to your point, everybody says that now. So, you know, I've seen things like, hey, Scouts Honor, you know, we use this. The big thing is that has been pretty consistent for a long time now is making sure that people understand why you're asking for the information that you're asking for. So when it's compelling to them that, oh, I actually do need to give this information over in order to get what I'm looking for, that's the most important thing. And then when you can add whatever verbiage you want that you're not just going to spam people, I think that goes a long way.
Great, thank you. A second one is in reference to claiming your business on the Google search results. Can you do that for a university department?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer it specifically for universities, but it's a similar answer for, in many ways, for multiple location businesses, as well as for think like doctor's offices or for law firms with individual lawyer names and things like that. Although there's a couple unique things in those two situations. The answer is yes, you can claim it separately. So you could have the School of Business, for example. That's a little bit, I think might make more sense than saying for the marketing department. I think it's more likely you're going to do it for a specific school in the higher education space. What I would highly encourage you, and I understand we work with a lot of universities. I understand that these can be, shall I say, political and challenging situations sometimes, to make sure that you're aligned as much as possible. In most cases, depending on how big your university or college is, my preference would be for that to be under one master account where everything can be updated from one place. Because what happens too often is someone in one department or one school claims it, they leave, then people can't find that information, and how did they get it claimed? And if you've been through that situation before, it can be a pain in the butt with Google to get that rectified. So I would encourage you to do it at the global level, but at minimum, even if you're saying, no, I operate my own little fiefdom, and you're going to claim it, that's fine. But please, please, please make sure that the information is shared with multiple people within your school, so that they're able to do that. And I would prefer in that situation that you create if you don't already have one, a generic email address to do the claiming and to do the ownership of it rather than one individual's claim.
Great. Can you discuss strategy on backlinks?
Yeah, so we go back to backlinks. We're talking about how do we build up the credibility for SEO in Google's eyes. So getting those other sites to link back to you is a huge source of building that credibility. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. I'll start with some of the basic ones out there. The first is look for places that are already talking about your website. And if they're already talking about your website, can you get them to then include a link? And it could be as simple as asking for that link. I would also encourage people where you have memberships, maybe individually, putting links from those memberships, from those schools, from those chambers of commerce, from the Pittsburgh Technology Council's listing, wherever you already have those relationships, have those links driving back. So that's some of the low-hanging fruit that you can start with. Certainly anything that you're putting out on a press release, you would want to make sure that that was included. I do think it's worthwhile if you're doing a press release in the real world that you do it online as well. The other thing that you can look at, I'll give you another strategy that that we like to use called link reclamation, and you can use this in two ways. One way is where maybe you've moved your website or a page or a URL has changed. You can then take that URL that is broken and reach out to that site and ask if they can update that URL to point back to your website, to the new page, the more relevant page of your website. You can also do that same thing if you find a broken link to a competitor. You can then reach out to that site and say, oh, that link's broken, but we actually have good information over here. Is another way that you can kind of help yourself doubly in that kind of situation.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? I think that's all. Any parting words, Justin?
Nope. No, this is great. I appreciate everybody's time. And like I said, if you have any questions that you didn't feel comfortable talking about on here, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards as well. And I would just encourage everybody to please be generous in giving as well as accepting help.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Justin. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your insight with us. I also want to make sure that everyone is aware of some upcoming events that we have going on in the next couple of weeks. On the 27th, we have a virtual career fair that's going on. So if your company's hiring, this is free for member companies to participate. So let us know. Also on the 27th, we have the Global CIO of Zoom, who will be speaking as part of our CIO Insights and Business as Usual call at noon. I'm sure most of you have heard the news that Zoom is opening up an office here in Pittsburgh. And so that will be next week. On the 28th through Friday, June 5th, we will have our virtual STEM Summit. So this is for anyone who is a parent and has kids that are middle or high school students, any teachers, administrators. We're going to be going into some of the hottest tech companies here in Pittsburgh and learning about what it's like to work there and what the career path is. So this is not just for members of the PTC, this is for the community. And then also we have a Made in PA Supplier Forum with GE Healthcare on the 2nd of June. So if you're looking to do business with GE Healthcare, this is for your business development folks. So, let them know if they want to do business. This will help you get your foot into the door. We will have limited one-on-one meetings with their procurement team. And yeah, just make sure that you come to our website and register for events. And, we've moved everything virtually for the time being. So we look forward to seeing you on a future Zoom call. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.